Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. God, take broken flesh and work a miracle and speak to all of us, including the speaker. In Jesus' name, amen. Last week, I said to you that the raw translation of verse 15 is essentially this: be extremely thoughtful where you step. Step as a wise person in life and not as an unwise person in life. And I told you that the distinguishing factor between unwise people and wise people, at least as it relates to this text, is essentially the big question that we ask. Some folk often ask when they're considering whether to do something or not, they ask the question, is it legal? Is it ethical? Is there anything wrong with it? Will it hurt anyone? But the wise person asks the question, is it wise? Everybody say, is it wise? That's the big question. And I told you last week that in order to calibrate the answer correctly, we really need to ask that question from at least three different vantage points in our lives. In light of our past history, our past failures and successes, our traumas and our triumphs, in light of our past, is what I'm considering doing wise? Not that it's right or wrong, but just is it wise? In light of my current season, my current frame of mind, my emotional state, my physical situation, my financial situation, in light of my current season, is what I'm considering wise. And in light of my future dreams and hopes, where I would like to be 10 years from now, or 15 years, or 20 years from now, in my relationships, in my professional life, in my financial life, in the light of where I want to end up, is the decision that I'm about to make right now, is it wise? And I said to you that this is a question that we can ask repeatedly throughout each day, and we can use it as a filter for every aspect of our lives. And for many of us, if we would do that, it would simply change the trajectory of our future. And for others of us, it would cause our lives to explode with a freshness and a robustness that we long to see. And had we asked these questions over the years, had I asked these questions, we'd have less regrets and less pain now. Now, the next couple of weeks, I'm going to apply this question to two other areas. I'm going to apply this question to the decisions that we make around money. And then I'm going to apply this question to decisions that we make around relationships. So if you know anyone who makes poor decisions around money or around relationships, I want you to encourage them to come join you here over the course of the next 2 weeks. And by the way, if you're sitting next to that person, don't look at them. Just look ahead, look ahead, look ahead. All right, so here's the focus. Today, though, it's a question of time. Everybody say a question of time. And apply this to how we think about time. Now, if we take this verse 16, as a matter of fact, as we're focusing on today, it says, make the most of every opportunity. Now, if you look at the phrase, make the most, you can translate that phrase a variety of different ways. You can translate it to redeem. You could say redeem, or it could translate to purchase or buy back. It's a Greek word. It's an accounting term. Or in a much more applied sense, you could say this: squeeze every ounce of value out. If you look at the word that is translated opportunity, you could easily translate that word time. As a matter of fact, there are other translations that render this particular verse, redeem the time. Or you could render it this way: purchase buy back every moment that you tend to waste. Or you could render it this way: squeeze every ounce of value out of every opportunity you are given. Because the days are evil, Paul would add. Now, when I look at this verse, two observations come to mind. Here's the first observation: that time is equal to opportunity. Time is equal to opportunity. I was reminded of that this morning. I had my alarm set for 2 a.m. I was already up. Now, I should have got my first clue. When at about 10 o'clock last night, I said to Siri, Siri, set my alarm for 2 a.m. And Siri says, alarm has been set for 3 a.m. But Siri always kind of get things mixed up. So I looked at it, was set for 2, so I just ignored it. So that should have been my clue. So I'm working, but I had a time check at 2 a.m., so I'm working on the message. And then the alarm goes off, and I look at my phone, and it says 3 a.m. But it's supposed to say 2 a.m. And then it dawned on me that at 2 a.m., come on now, we went up an hour. That means that we lost a complete hour. No, let me make it clear. I lost a complete hour. I couldn't believe it. I was like, give me my hour back. Are you kidding? Because it was 60 minutes of opportunity. I thought I had 6 hours to finish preparing this message. Now I've got 5, and it was just going like that. I was so upset. And I was fuming at stuff coming out my ears, and then I realized that I better get to work, because while I was fuming, now I actually have 4 hours and 50 seconds and 4 hours and I was frustrated because I'd missed my opportunity. How would your life change if you started to think about time as opportunity? How would you look at your schedule, your life differently, if you started thinking about your schedule as a series of opportunities? Now, I think one of the philosophers said this, that a life well lived is a life that undergoes real reflection. So as I talk you through this over the next few minutes, I want you to be thinking about your life. Now, I want you to be thinking about how you use time. Someone said to me earlier that if you spend time without a plan, it's like spending money without a budget. You look around, you don't know where anything went. So, opportunity. Everybody say opportunity. The way you use your time can expand opportunity, or it can minimize opportunity. The other observation that comes from this text is that time is equal to life. It equates with life. It's interchangeable. Someone says it this way: well, I'm just killing time. Henry David Thoreau makes this point. I thought it's an interesting quote that he says, I'm paraphrasing, he says, no one can kill time without doing damage to eternity. That's a substantive quote. As you kill time, you're killing potentially, and I'm not saying you shouldn't rest and reflect and all that, but I just want to use the word. As you're killing time, you only just have just so much time. And your opportunity is getting smaller, smaller, smaller. This is what Job means when he says in chapter 14, verse 5, and he says that a person's days are determined. You have decreed the number of his months. You have set limits that he cannot exceed. You have just so much time. Each of you, you have just so much time. And right now, the sand in the hourglass is running. What are you going to do with it? The psalmist, Psalms 90, verse 5, he writes this. He says, teach us to realize the brevity, everybody say brevity, the briefness of life, that we might grow in wisdom. And here's his suggestion. The moment I realize that my time is running out and I have just so much time and I don't get any more time, that's the moment that I can begin to become wise with how I use my time. Now, some of us, this is a good word because we think we got all the times in the world and we're just doing all kind of crazy stuff, right? Jumping bikes and all kind of stuff. Driving 100 miles per hour, drag racing, because we just think we got all the time in the world. And what the psalmist is saying, if you knew that your time is limited, you wouldn't do that crazy stuff. On the other hand, the psalmist is hoping that as we realize that we have limited time, it would drive us, though, to take some well worth risks. Sensible risk. For example, some of you are stuck in what you think is a dead-end job. And the psalmist would argue, if you realize that your time is getting short, you ought to take a risk. Shoot for another job. Some of you are stuck in life-sucking relationships. You're just too afraid to do something different. But the psalmist would say to you, your time is getting short. Don't waste it. Act. Life and time equals. Let me tell you this story. Because I want you to get this point, that when it's gone, it's gone. When I used to live in Boston, I would come out here from time to time and preach, and then various assignments, and then fly back. On this particular occasion, I flew back overnight, a red eye, landed in New York because I had to change planes in New York. I must have got there about 4:30 or 5 in the morning. So I was exhausted, red eye flight. So I'm sitting actually at the gate. I don't go anywhere. I just sit at the gate, and I'm sitting there waiting on the next flight, and I'm just kind of nodding off because I'm just waiting. And what I'm really waiting on is waiting for, I'm watching the gate. And when the line of folk began to line up, I know that's time, my flight's coming. So I nodded off, woke up, nodded off. And finally, I see the line begin to form, a long line. I looked at the long line. I said, I got plenty of time. Come on, say that with me. I got plenty of time. I got plenty of time. So man, I'm just waiting, and I nodded off again. Finally, I wake up, nobody around. Line is gone. I get up, I hustle over to the desk, and I said, excuse me. She said, may I help you? I said, yeah, my name's Hurmon. I need to get on that flight. She said, oh, that flight's gone. I couldn't believe it. I said, no, she didn't say that. I said, no, I need to get on the flight. She said, what's your name? I said, Hurmon Ham. She says, we were calling you. We called you repeatedly, and you didn't come. We said it was the last call, and you didn't come. I said, but I was sitting right over there. She said, well, I'm sorry. I said, how come you didn't come wake me up? She said, I'm sorry. It's gone. Now, here's what's the most profound point about the story that really shook me up. It's not like I missed the flight because I was stuck in security. It's not like I missed the flight because I was way on the other side of the airport. Y'all, I was asleep at the gate. I missed the flight sleeping at the gate. This is what Paul is saying when he's saying, squeeze every ounce of value out of every opportunity, because the days are evil. And what he was saying to the followers of Jesus in the city of Ephesus is that Ephesus is full of all kinds of stuff that is seductive, that will lure you to sleep. And if you're not careful, you'll miss God's plan for your life sitting right at the gate. If you're not careful, you'll miss God's best for your life sitting right at the gate. I mean, you can live in the house with your kids day in and day out, week after week, and over 10, 15 years. But because you spend most of your time working and little time with them, you turn around one day and you say, where did the time go? You don't know them. They don't know you. You missed the plane sleeping right at the gate. You can carry and harbor a grudge between you and a sibling. You just can't get it worked out. And then one of you discovers that you've got cancer, and suddenly you've discovered that life is short, and you realize all this time you could have been in relationship and enjoying your sibling. You were carrying a grudge and being angry, and you missed the flight right at the gate. You know, some of you here, God is kind of like that woman who was, she said to me, she said, we were calling you. And for some of you, this is a wake-up call. God is saying, look, you're sitting at the gate and you're about to miss your flight, but I'm calling your name. I'm calling your name. I'm calling your name. Don't miss the flight. Don't let your time just get away. So, what's the question then? In light of this observation, what's the question? So here's the question that we got to examine very quickly. In light, given this notion that when it's gone, and I don't want to miss it at the gate, in light of my past history, my weaknesses and my strengths, in light of my current season, my particular circumstance that I'm living my life in, where I am with my kids, where I am financially, where I am in my relationships, in light of my future dreams and my future hopes, where I want to be 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now, what kind of decisions ought I be making with time right now? What kind of decisions? And this text gives me 3 very quick insights that I think is worth paying attention to. First, I want to remind you that this notion, redeem the time, buy it back, it's an accounting phrase. It has within it the implications of not just buying back, but rather the right investment. So I want to just relay this to you. So if you started work in your early 20s and you set aside $100 out of each paycheck. You don't have to be 100, just do 50 out of each paycheck. And you did that for 30 years. You would be able to retire happily. Either you could retire on the beaches of Hawaii, or you could at least retire on the banks of the Red River in Coshada. But you could retire. Because there's a point where interest kicks in and it's compounding. So here comes the insight out of this. Watch this. Small amounts of time consistently invested in various aspects of your life over a long period equals great life impact. Anybody here who's trying to become a better golfer, you know that it's small investments of time. You got to get out there and hit those balls on a week-to-week basis, and about a year, maybe 2 years from now, it's not that you can beat Tiger Woods, but you can at least play in the same game with him. Small allotments of time consistently invested makes you a better cook, makes you a better pianist. Consistently invested life impact. Now, this is particularly true in the area of relationships, either with God or with ourselves. Let me give you a list of things that if you would just invest a small amount of time consistently over a long period would make all the difference. Dinner with your family at the family table once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, small allotment of time. Date, night date, weekly spouse date, where you go. Now, don't do what some of these couples, Miranda and I see when we go out. They're sitting in the restaurant. That must be the restaurant they go to every month, I guess, because they're sitting there. One got their iPhone out, the other one got their Samsung out there, and they're not talking at all. They could have stayed at home for all of that, right? So Pastor Tilden told us a few weeks ago, find a different activity. At least go to a different restaurant. So you got to engage. You got to, that'll make all the difference. I met once a week for 17 years with a friend who's become a dear friend of mine, Pastor Stan Johnson, for 17 years, once a week for breakfast. Every week, if I was in town, if I was able, we met every week, and it wasn't a particular meeting. It was what happened over the period of 17 years. One-on-one time with your children, whether they are preteens, teenagers, or adult children, over a period of time makes a difference. Regular attending church consistently over a period. Not any one particular worship service will change your life per se, but over a period of time, there's a nurturing of your faith. There's an awareness of who God is. There's the ability to begin to see life from a God's perspective over a period of time. A meeting with a small Bible study group on a regular basis. Spending time one-on-one, just you and God. Every day, about 5 minutes. These are all examples of small allotments of time, well invested. This is what Paul is saying. Be careful. Watch what you're doing with your time. Be very careful with it. That can make huge life impact in due season. Now, here's the second point that I think is also extremely important. Rarely are there immediate implications for the neglect of any single installment of time. Now, let me give you this story. It makes the point backwards. I think we were about into our 5th year of marriage, Rhonda and I. And we were watching a basketball game. And Rhonda commented on one or two of the players' arms. I said, excuse me? And she said, I've always liked big arms. Now, here's what I heard. I've always liked big arms, but I married you anyhow. So, I'm a little... I was thinking about this. So I said, well, she's been a really great wife. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get some big arms. This is a true story. All right? So I go pay a subscription to a gym. I get that one-day coach, show me how to do all these different things. No. Just show me how to get some arms. So then she showed me the thing. She said, you got to do these many reps and da-da-da-da. I said, wonderful. So I came back the next day, and I got on the machine, and I started doing the rep. And man, I must have worked for 45 minutes. I was full of sweat. Then I looked at my arms. No change. I said, well, I'll just give it a couple more times. So I came back 2 more times. This is the truth. And so on the 3rd time, I worked. Now, mind you, every day I had to get up. I could barely get out of bed. So I'm really suffering here trying to get these big arms. And so finally, after the 3rd time, I said, this ain't working. Why am I going to go through all this soreness? Come on, really? This is true. I'm making the point backwards here. Because many of us, when we skip dinner with our family and we do it for a little while, there's no immediate consequences. When we skip that night date, when we stop coming to church for a few weeks, there's no immediate consequences. And so we look at the fact that there's no immediate consequences, and so we conclude it's okay. I can just keep skipping. I can just keep skipping. And that's where the value system of a broken world seduces us and drives us out of God's purposes for our lives. But Paul says, be wise. Here's a third insight that comes. Listen, third insight is that at the neglect over a long period has a cumulative effect. Now, let me prove it to you. It's been, 23 years since I had that 3-day encounter with the gym. Look at me. Neglect over a long period of time has a cumulative effect. You get the point? And you can't reverse it just in one moment. Listen, I can't just go back and do one real workout and make up for the last 23 years that I've missed in the gym. You can't reverse it just in a moment. You can't miss 15 years of dinners with your family and then say, let's go on a long vacation and make it right. You can't, miss 10 years of no date nights with your spouse and no showing up to your kids' games, and then after 10 years you turn around to your spouse and say, here's a ring. Oh, she's going to take the ring, but the ring doesn't make up for the weakened, broken relationship. You can't miss 15 years of your kids' achievements and opportunities and sports and then turn around and say, I'm going to give them a car as though that makes up for it. It doesn't. You can't just make up for it. So what do we do? Well, one person says, the best time for me to have made this change, like if you ask me about, would be 23 years ago. Ooh, I would have been buff. You would have confused me with Arnold Schwarzenegger. But you know when the second best time to make the change? Today. Right now. Right now. So here's the teaching moment. It comes straight out of the text. Paul is saying, look at what time you have left. I'm going to talk about what's behind you in a minute. Look at what time you have left and squeeze the value out of every opportunity. Buy back the moments that you have allowed to land in wasteland. Make a plan. That's what he said. Make a plan. Redeem the time that's left. Here's how you do it. Put those words up. I want you to write down 4 words in your notes. Just write down these 4 words. Write them down. Think about your life physically. Think about and how you're using time. Think about your life relationally, your relational life, how you're using time. Think about your professional life and how you're using time. And then think about your spiritual life, how you're using time. So write those 4 words down. And then I want you to start thinking about, even now, if the Lord will bring some stuff to your mind, you can just write it down. Even now, I just want you to identify one thing that you're going to do in each category to begin to redeem the time. One thing. Physically, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I've already decided, because I haven't done any exercise in years, really. So what I've decided to do is that, this message has convicted me, that about 3 times a week, I'm going to walk for 30 minutes. That's my start. I can do it at work. I can just exit, go out and walk for 30 minutes. What's yours? How are you going to redeem the time? Are you going to maybe going to cut something out of your regular diet? You're going to add an exercise routine. You're going to give up Friday night drinking. I don't know what. What are you going to do relationally? Are you going to add, say, at least once a week, I'm going to sit down with my family and we're going to do it consistently? Are you going to identify your really good friend and start having a regular breakfast or lunch with them so they can pour in your life and vice versa? What are you going to do relationally? Are you going to spend one-on-one time with your kids? Thursday and Friday night, that's me and Lauren's time. Every Thursday night, I pick her up, I take her to gymnastics. She talks to me all the way there, tells me all about her day, and she goes in and she does gym for about an hour and 15 minutes, and she comes out. And you know, every week, this happens every week. And I think there's something pretty powerful emerging. She's learning that my dad is going to be there for me. And when he drops me off, I don't have to worry. When I come back, where I left him, he's going to be right there. What you going to do? Relationally. What are you going to do spiritually? How do you begin to get the mind of Christ in your life? How do you begin to see the world from God's perspective? How do you begin to slip into, because don't you want God's best for your life? Don't you? What are you going to do? Do you say, I'm going to start spending 5 minutes? Maybe some of you say, I'm going to take the next few weeks and I'm going to go to the website, nbccbayarea.com, and I'm going to look at that daily devotion since it only takes 5 minutes or less to do. Okay, I'm going to start there. Maybe somebody else says, well, you know, I'm gonna just finish out this series and come to church from now until Easter. Maybe you start there. Maybe you do what my wife is doing, and that is she reads about 5 to 6 verses. She's reading through Romans. And by the way, if you're going to read through the Bible, I always suggest the second half, the New Testament, in the Gospels, and read a translation that doesn't need to be translated. If you speak King James, you read that. But if you don't, get New Living Translation or something like that, right? And she says she's only reading about 4 or 5 verses, and she's talking about what a difference it's making in her life, both practically and spiritually. Maybe you'll start that. You'll say, no, I'm just going to read 5 verses and write a little reflection about it. Where do you start? And then, see, in that instance, you are now looking at your future, what time is left, and you're doing what you can do. That's what God is calling you to do. But what about the past? Watch this. Do what you can do. And then invite God to do what only God can do. Here's what I got in it. See, you can redeem the time that's ahead, but God can redeem the time that's behind. You can focus on your tomorrows, but God can transform your yesterdays. Listen, I told y'all last week about my falling in Mr. Ben Postale's pastor into wet cow manure, and I told you about how that can mess up your day. Remember? But I want to end this week by telling you another story about Mr. Ben Pastel. Around the springtime, when my grandmother started to plant her garden up by the river, she would tell me at the right time, she said, Hurmon, get on your bike, go up to Mr. Ben Postel, take this bag. That same cow manure that was wet, that if I fell in, it messed me up, it would dry. And we called it cow chip. And if you were sick in my day, they'd take cow chip and make a tea. And if you were sick, I promise you, you're going to get better. I'm going somewhere here with this. Stay with me. Come on. So they make tea out of it. But my grandmama would say, get it and put it in the bag and bring it to me. And I'd get it and put it in the bag. Drive back up and put it in there and give it to her. And she put a glove on her hand and she'd go in that cow chip, crunch it up, and just started dropping it on the stuff she had planted, And then after several weeks, I look around and I say, Grandma, where the beautiful tomatoes would be there. The greens with the bottoms on it would be there. The peas coming off on the stick would be there. And I said, Grandma, how you do all that? She said, it's that cow chip. This is my only point here, and I got to go sit down. See, God specializes in handling your cow chip. Come on now. That all of the pain in your yesterdays, the woundedness and the mistakes and the regrets that make you shame, God says, I'll restore the years that the locust has eaten. God can take your yesterday's hurt. and use it to bring strength and insight and vision and a new career and a new ministry and a new blessing in tomorrow. Let him redeem your yesterdays as you focus on your tomorrows. Shout hallelujah. I'm finished. Here's what I want you to do. If you're going to take the challenge that I presented with each of those 4 words, if you're going to figure out how you redeem the time. But one thing, I want you to look at your connection card and where it says response to the sermon. Everybody show me your connection card. Point it in there. Okay, where it says response to the sermon. If you're going to do what I've asked you to do, I just simply want you to write, I will. God bless you.